Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Studio 78 podcast. I am your host, Nache from NacheSnow.com. Welcome. I am so excited to introduce you guys to this week's guest, and I'm just excited to have her on because I've loved her magazine forever. And that's Janine Vangool from UPPERCASE Magazine. She is amazing. Her magazine actually features creators, artists, illustrators, designers from all over. Her magazine has always had an amazing, diverse set of creatives that it features. And even her last issue, which was for October, November, December, because her issues are quarterly, the theme of it was exploring empathy, art therapy, authorship, and language. And I just loved like the letter from the editor on how it felt like it was important in this time of change that everyone knew exactly where her magazine stands, and she totally believes in Black Lives Matter. So I just thought, number one, I love that issue. Beautiful. The artist featured in it, absolutely amazing. And so I really looked forward to having her come on just to tell us her origin story. I dig also a little bit into how she was able to create the magazine, what worked, what doesn't work, how she builds her community, what she thinks of community. And we have this awesome conversation. I literally could just talk to her forever, but I didn't. So, now in this episode, I primarily focus on the main magazine itself, but no, Janine also has like a magazine for small creatives, and she has like books she sells, and we just dabble a little bit into it, but she also sells some of her patterns on fabrics. So really wide range of things that she does and covers, but in this episode, I mainly focused on UPPERCASE Magazine to keep it at a good length. Anywho, I know you guys are going to be inspired by her story, and regardless if you want to start a magazine or not, I think this episode will really just get your juices turning, and at the very least you're going to want to support her magazine. And I will just say, I think you guys should pick up her next issue for January, February, March, issue 48, because I'm just saying it might be a little something special in there. And that issue, she talks a little bit about it, but it's all about paper and sustainable paper. So traditional stationery and paper goods, all the way to just getting it printed like normal to little digital too. So check out 48. Be sure to pick it up. So a few housekeeping things. If you haven't already, please hit that little subscribe button wherever you are listening. Also, remember, sharing is caring. Not only do you support me, but you support all the creative women that I bring on, because a lot of the women I have featured have been able to get business from people who either just listen to the podcast on a normal basis or share it with a friend, and their friend actually wants to do business with them. So you not only support me, but you're supporting this whole wide network of creative women when you share. And then, of course, please leave a rating wherever you are, a comment wherever you are. All those things, though seems very small, they really do help. And last but not least, head on over to NacheSnow.com and hit that little shop button. See what I've got in the shop that might tickle your fancy, because I've got a lot of digital products over there, and I'm going to continue to add more. And of course, I have my t-shirts over there, from my hand letter Black Lives Matters t-shirt to the Black Joys t-shirt to Love Child of Productivity and Creativity t-shirt. So if you want to support the podcast by purchasing any of those products, Please do. Let's get to Janine's story. Hello, Janine. Welcome to the Studio 78 podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Absolutely. So, for those of you out there, number one, you can't see this because this is audio, of course, but her background is a stationary junkie's dream. I love all the things in your background right now. Thanks again for coming on to the podcast. I'm obsessed with all things publishing, from books to magazines. And I know some of my listeners out there have always dreamed of starting a magazine. So I can't wait to find out how you were able to do it. But before I dig into that, just curious, can you just tell us a little bit about you before Uppercase Magazine?
It's so hard to remember before Uppercase. Well, let's see. So I'm 47. I'm a graphic designer by training. So I went to art college and studied visual communications. And when I graduated, I had a job for about 9 months with a horrible boss that sort of set the tone for what I didn't want to do with the rest of my life, do graphic design. So I did freelance design for arts and culture clients for about 12 years. And then I kind of got tired of working for other people again. And that's when I started Uppercase. And Uppercase started as a gallery, books, and paper goods store / art gallery in downtown Calgary, Alberta, where I live. And then a few years later, it sort of mutated and evolved into a publishing company.
Interesting. So what year was that when you started?
I started Uppercase Gallery, Books, and Paper Goods in 2005, and the magazine launched in 2009.
And so with your, before you started the magazine with the paper goods, were you envisioning you were going to have this little cute boutique, or were you thinking online? So what was your vision initially?
Well, in 2005, when this all started, I did graphic design for clients, and I had been doing that out of my home for a long time. And that was the year my husband and I were getting married, and he was also working from home. And I couldn't imagine both of us working from home I just didn't want to do that. And so there was a space opening up in downtown Calgary called Art Central, and they were actually mentioned in one of the design projects I was working on. And their mandate was a public space, 3 levels of galleries and studios, and a public place where people could gather and see art and design. And I thought, oh, this is lovely. I like this idea. I could rent a space there and have my design business. The only caveat was that they wanted this public aspect to it. I couldn't just be office. So that's when the idea of, I could have an art gallery and kind of highlight graphic design and things that I like and visual culture. And I could sell greeting cards that I design and make stuff. And it just sort of started from there as gallery, books, and paper goods. Because when I started, I didn't really know what I was going to do. So having a very long name with lots of stuff in it seemed like I'll find something in there that'll work. And so that's how it started. And then I really got to know a lot of artists. And this was 2005, 2006. And so I was looking at blogging was still a thing. And it was in its kind of the height of blogging, and Flickr for sharing photos and stuff. And so I got to know a lot of artists and designers that way. And I would invite them to send stuff for shows in my gallery and come up with themes. And so I really kind of be at that point. And that's sort of where this kind of eclectic Uppercase style that I have now came about, with kind of gathering other people's creativity and creating themes. And so a few years later, when I was I wanted to transition out of doing design for other people, and publication design and magazines was always a dream of mine. So that's where Uppercase Magazine came about.
Oh,
so I just kept the name because I had the URL already.
It makes it easy, right?
Yeah.
So you have this idea for a magazine, and I feel like All creatives probably at some point wish they had a magazine, right? But we never quite get it going. So, what was like some of your first steps? Because it's a whole thing, right? Like publishing, getting content, and figuring out how do you get it in stores and how do you get subscriptions. So what was your process when you decided, okay, I'm going to do this?
Hmm. Well, ignorance was bliss back then because I didn't really know how to do any of it, right? So, but I had graphic design as my training, so I knew I had all the skills to create something that would look great. And I had been working for other clients that published books and magazines, and there had been a magazine for Christian youth called Beyond Magazine that I had designed for a couple of,
Mm,
well, for a number of years. It wasn't a topic that I have any personal relationship to, but it was a good job to have, and they were let me and my design partner have a lot of creative freedom. So I learned a lot about kind of behind the scenes. They were operating their magazine, and
mm.
kind of what not to do, and what was successful, and how to build a community. Unfortunately, they had a tough go of it, and there were sometimes like 4 years between issues.
Oh, wow.
so so that when they finally decided that magazine wasn't going to continue, like that's when I decided, okay, now the magazine part of my brain is free to come up with my own concept. And so yeah, so I didn't have exact training, but I just had a lot of observations, and I knew kind of what I wanted to create from a design standpoint.
Mm,
And then I just figured out the logistics as I went along, like figuring out how to get subscribers and how to kind of do it pre-order style. And, I didn't really think beyond what the time and financial investment would be for the first four issues. And then,
mm-hmm.
I didn't really think it was going to be sustainable past that point, but it has been, and it kept going. So 10 plus
It
years
worked
later,
out. Well,
it
I,
worked
I
out.
definitely want to dig into some of those details or my listeners will kill
Hmm.
me. But before I do, can you just, explain to them what Uppercase Magazine is about?
Sure. Well, the tagline I call is for a magazine for the creative and curious. So that's pretty broad because I hope to think that a lot of us are creative and curious. But what that means really is within the realm of graphic design, like typography and illustration and lettering and craft and things made by hand and kind of all these aesthetic pursuits. That's the umbrella within where Uppercase kind of gets its inspiration.
Mm,
And I really believe that creative people are inspired by things that come from different places, different genres, different people, different walks of life, different perspectives, different kinds of craft, different kinds of illustration. And I like to
mhm,
bring all sorts of different things into the magazine under perhaps a few themes per issue to kind of corral it together, but that those juxtapositions of different ideas and different ways of approaching the same topic will spark ideas for the readers.
yeah, and you guys, I love her magazine. It's like amazing. So to dig into some of the details, subscriptions, right? So, how do you go about, hey, everybody, I got this magazine going on and I need some money? So, what was your process for getting people to buy it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so this was pre Kickstarter as well, so it wasn't
Hmm.
like the crowdfunding thing was still a new idea. But basically, it started because I had a blog, I had a decent following, and I had these artists and illustrators that I had a good relationship with through the art
Mm,
gallery and having shows. And it was just reaching out to them and saying, "Hey, look, I have an idea for a magazine, like you said, and do you want to support it?" And then I use my skills as a graphic designer, and I'm good at planning to figure out what my expenses would be just from a hard cost of printing it, and what, like, the print run for the first issue was only 1,000 copies, and what it would cost to mail it. And so I did the math and figured, well, I have to charge a certain amount for subscription, and that's what I put out there and said, if you want to support this, you can go buy it on my shop. And people did. So I think by the time the first issue came out, 400 people had subscribed, and that was enough to,
Wow.
pay for the first issue. And by the end of the first year, I had almost 1,000 subscribers. So it went way better than I anticipated for that first launch. After that, though, it gets harder. And there were definitely, like, because after the first calculations were, what are my costs and how can I cover my costs? And then it becomes, oh, well, now I have to cover the cost of paying all the contributors and what the portion of my rent is going towards this for the magazine, and paying something for me and all of
Oh,
that
yeah.
eventually, But eventually it started to be a way to support myself and my family. So I'm very grateful to all the subscribers who have come along for the ride.
And then one question that I've been asking people this season
Mhm.
is about building a community, right? So it sounds like you were able to tap into that community. When I look at your Instagram account, which is super beautiful, I'll have it linked in the show notes. You've built a large community over there too. So you have this community you built on social, community you've built via email, I'm assuming, with the blog, and then just people who just subscribe to the blog too through all the different readers or what have you. But how are you able to build that community? I know it's kind of hard, like kind of thinking back to, right? Like it's because sometimes it's just so organic. You're like, what did I do? But when you think back, like, how are you able to really, I guess, really get that community going?
Well, the building has happened over many, many years, over a decade. So if someone looks at it and goes, "Oh, how'd you do that?" Well, it's just putting in the time, and first of all, always creating something that is really high quality and something that I'm proud of and that I'm happy to put out there that people are going to naturally want to share because it's really good. Like that's the first thing for building a community, is putting something of quality out there, and just, yeah, just bringing that to the table. And then, as far as for me, the part that I've always loved about Uppercase Magazine and the people I get to work with and collaborate with is I get to know the subscribers, and I'm always asking them to submit their work and pitch ideas. And if someone purchases a subscription in my shop and they have a unique URL, like I'll look and see what they do, right? Like I just want to know who they are so that I can serve them better. And also maybe they have some content lurking in there that would be good. Maybe they want to work for the magazine or be an illustrator for the magazine or something. So that's been my number one way of growing the community, is just reaching out to the people who are supporting me and seeing how do they want to be featured. There's always open calls for submissions, and a column called Fresh where people who've never been published before can get published. And so I think that for me has been like the most gratifying part of growing the community and the part that I love. As far as social media, like I started out on Twitter in 2009, I guess. I did my first tweet when I was waiting for the truck to deliver the first issues of the magazine. Um, so like in the early days of Twitter, that was really fun and such. And then more recently, I've been on a like extended break from Twitter, like many years of not posting anything until like this past week I started again. And on Instagram, I've never had any sort of strategy there. Like
Mm.
I just would post what I wanted to in the early days of that, and then more recently I would just repost other people's lovely photos of my books and magazines with occasional stuff of what I'm doing. But this year I've really stepped away from Instagram
Mm.
significantly, and I don't know what to do about it.
Mm.
Instagram is a weird. There's apparently 60,000 people following me, which makes me very uncomfortable because I'm a very private, quiet person, and I did not want that many people following me on Instagram. Like, why are they following me? Because I I just don't know. So if people are looking at my Instagram and thinking, "Wow, she's got so many followers," like that's not on purpose, and I don't really like it. So I have the opposite approach to Instagram. Yeah. So I just recently started posting on Instagram, and I'm being political when I want to be. And I am right now, I started a campaign it's called stay home for the holidays to get people to realize that they need to just kind of maybe not go out for Thanksgiving and such and
Not
Christmas, and we
spread
just need to
COVID.
protect ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just, because there's so many people on Instagram following me, I'm just gonna kind of get the courage to say what I want on there and see what happens. So
Yeah, I mean,
anyway,
it's like, what's the worst that can happen? They unfollow, and it's like,
yeah,
okay.
and that would be great. So I don't know. It's something I've been thinking a lot about, and so that's a weird part of the community building where I don't feel comfortable about Instagram, but within my own control, I have a private uppercase circle, I call it, for subscribers, and it's a
Mm.
hosted on Mighty Networks, and subscribers can come in there, and we have creative prompts, and we've had video chats, and people can post about what they're working on and share their ideas and feedback and such. So that's been very nice, and I like the kind of controlled aspect of it where there's no ads and it's not algorithm based, and it's just much more
Hmm.
natural over there. So
No, I get it. It's funny, like, in talking to people about social media, like, some people are like, oh my God, I want 1 million followers. And, they have like this goal, right? Like, I want 300,000 people following me. But I'm like, there is like this like sweet spot. Like, even when I look, like, my Instagram account is really small. It's like 1,400 people. But I'm like, I feel like I know those 1,400 people. Like, when people comment or things like that, if I'm following or not following them, I'm like, oh yeah, that's so and so. Yeah, I remember their account. Like, I know them, right? But I'm like, the bigger your account gets, then it's harder to have that intimacy with your following, right? And then it is a little bit more pressure too, because people just come down like a firestorm when you post something. But I guess it's
mm-hmm.
just getting used to it and just not caring as much, right? But I could only imagine like the pressure of having that many followers.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit of stage fright. Like I don't want. So yeah, I just I don't know 60,000 people. Who are they? Why are they following me? I don't understand that. So yeah, I have thought about, like, just what if I made my account private and only, like you said, just have people that I actually know and my actual subscribers who want to follow could be part of that. But it just becomes very cumbersome and awkward. So
Yeah,
it is
you
what
just got to
it's like.
become
It's
one. Got
fine.
to become one with
Yeah,
it.
it's
Hey,
fine.
I'm one of the 60,000. It's because we
I'm
love your
grateful.
stuff.
Well, but see, we connected though, because I follow you and you follow me, and somehow we've, our circles have aligned here. So that's lovely, and that does happen in Instagram, but
Yeah.
um, there's just some other drawbacks I'm trying to work through. Yeah.
Now, another question I have for you is about content. I think some people struggle with that a little bit, but for you, I think you have an interesting model because, and then correct me if I'm wrong, but you have some people that fill out the form, right, and create submissions, like different artists and creators, and then you figure out if it makes sense for that particular quarter. And then are the other people are like where you like maybe contract them, or do you have like full-time staff? Like, how do you figure out the content part of everything?
Mhm. Well, it's just me. It's a one-woman show, day-to-day stuff. But I have a copy editor, Corey, and he's in Montreal, and so he's the copy editor for every issue and every book, and he's a freelancer. And then I have an excellent roster of freelance writers and illustrators I call them my core contributors.
Mm,
And so they're people that are like ready, willing, and able. When I have assignment for them, that they'll take it on for the next issue or a future issue. And so typically it's because they're excellent writers and they're always on time and they produce quality content, and they might pitch ideas to me, or more often or not, I'll just say, well, here are some broad themes. What does this inspire? Do you know somebody? What would you like to do with it? So that's
mm,
kind of where I provide the structure, is through coming up with those themes and then assigning stuff and asking for feedback from those core writers. And then I'll also have these open calls for submissions where anyone their work or respond to a question or to a theme. And then there's also serendipitous stuff that happens where someone might email me and they go, oh, wow, this person is really perfect for, this issue because they do a certain kind of work that I'm thinking about thematically. And then there's always on my website a place where people can submit their portfolios or, like you said, these forms where I have like specific questions that people can answer and submit to the creative careers column or their sketchbooks or their studios and that sort of thing. So I'm just always gathering content, and it might not fit for the immediate issue that I'm working on, but I save everything and kind of categorize and sort, and it might show up a bit later on. So I'm basically always looking at content.
Now, are you like a Google person or a Dropbox person? Like, how do you keep all that stuff organized?
I definitely am a technology person in that I use all the tools that I possibly can to make my life easier. I use Submittable, which is an online system for gathering submissions where people can upload. It's like forums, and you can upload your images and stuff. And I use Dropbox for all the files and for sharing. And I use Notion, which is
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Notion. I don't know how to describe it exactly. It's so customizable. You can make it do whatever you need to do. But it's like I've created my own templates for each issue, for example, where I can keep track of of who I'm assigning and when it's due, and like I've got all these templates to help me manage all the ideas and content, and I drop all my image ideas and themes that I'm collecting or websites. I put it all in there and tag it all so that I can search it and resurface it when I need it. So those, I used to use Evernote very religiously for that, but more recently I switched to Notion because it just is a bit more robust. So those are the kind of the ways that I'm sorting and gathering and keeping things organized.
Nice. I'm like productivity junkie, so I always love to know how people are like keeping it together.
Yeah. Well, I watched your Skillshare on how to be productive. I forget what it was called. It was really good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I already do all that stuff, but like I just go, yay, someone else.
Yes, I'm like all about it. I'm like, that's the only way I can stay sane, right? I have to have everything has to be in its place, and I need to be able to find things quickly. Like I need it to be organized. And then I was gonna ask you as far as the magazine. So are you designing it? Like you're putting it all together? Oof.
Like that's why I started as a graphic designer. Like that's the icing on the cake, is to get to put it all together. So yeah, I do all that too. Yeah.
And I'm assuming you do it in InDesign?
Right. Yeah.
And so your magazine is quarterly. So how far in advance do you have to start working on like an upcoming issue?
Ideally, as far out as I can, just so that I can, have time. But like, for example, issue 48, which is the January, February, March issue, I just sent that to the printer on Friday. And so this week I'm concentrating on assigning issue 49, which will be out in April. So yeah, it never stops. Like there's always something that I have to be doing next. But I have in my Notion, I've designed a place where I have all the next issues, 4 of them for the next year, and I start kind of slotting in content and seeing where themes might be emerging. And when I'm really confident that yes, the theme is going to be happening like next fall, then I can start assigning that sooner rather than later. My goal for next year is to actually get a lot more content assigned earlier in the year and see if that alleviates inherent stresses of having a quarterly magazine, because there's always stuff that you got to do. So yeah, but
Yeah.
As far as how far in advance, it could be a year in advance that I start thinking about stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, because I love like even your different themes. Are they just like when you come up with the different themes, are they just in your head? Are you influenced by your environment or things that you're seeing? how are you, you say you've been doing this now almost now for a decade, right? And so it's
Over
like
a
you've
decade,
always
yeah.
been, yeah. And so how do you keep coming up with all these amazing creative ideas?
Well, so now that I've been around for so long, I'm starting to like reinterpret ideas I might have done before, which I think is totally fine.
For sure.
For example, finished is paper goods and stationery, which we all love paper. That's sort of like a
For
core
sure.
personality trait of people who read my magazine. But I hadn't done an issue about stationery since I think it was issue 17, and this is now
Oh,
48. So
wow.
it's
Yeah,
been
that's
many,
one
many
that needs to
years, right?
be revisited.
Yeah. And
Yes.
so stationary trends and such and aesthetics and what people are doing has changed a lot in those years. And so I just did another one. And this time my focus was on asking people to talk about what are they doing to be environmentally friendly and socially conscious in their business. And that was a
Mm-hmm.
requirement that they had to answer that in order to submit to be considered. So, like, that's a new slant on a topic I've already covered. And then elsewhere in this issue, we talk about really old stationery, like thinking back to how the original lined papers were made and ledger books, and how
Mm.
booksellers and stationers used to be the same person. I go way back there and look at what our graphic influences are now. So, for me, it's always there's a main topic in each issue, but then I try and go off on tangents and see
Mm.
where it leads me, right? So from paper goods, I thought about stationery, and then I thought about old fashioned stationery and ledger paper and lines and rules, and then I thought about
Mm.
the rules of creativity. And then thinking about
Mm.
our COVID situation where we're stationary spelled with an A and there's stationary starting with an E, right? Like so
Oh,
it just
yeah.
it's just my brain kind of going off in different places and then I try and make it work in a magazine. That's
It
how it happens. Yeah.
works. Speaking of stationery, because of course, stationery people are paper lovers, I love the texture of your magazine, right? It's like the weight, it's like fancy. So,
Hmm.
how did you get there? Was it always kind of like that stock of paper? How did you determine how you wanted your magazine to feel in people's hands and the size of the magazine too, because you know how some people, I know they've made a living off of like creating little mini zines, right, that are like,
Hmm.
10 pages or so. So for you, what was your thought process?
Well, when I first started, what I wanted was to create a magazine that was thick enough that it would have a spine. I didn't want it to be staple bound. It had to have a spine. And that's just sheer vanity as a graphic designer that I imagined my magazines lined up on a shelf with a beautiful spine. Number of pages, and the paper quality has to be fairly robust in order to have the spine. The first few issues only had 80 pages, but now it's like 116. And I always had it on uncoated stock. And then about issue 16, it switched to the one that I have now, which is 100% post consumer recycled paper, which is nice to use. So yeah, the paper, the feel, how you open it, the dimensions, those were all really well considered design problems to answer that I did earlier on, and it's not broken, so I just keep it. It's just the way it is now, so it's always that same paper, always with the spine pattern, always with the same number of pages. So yeah, that's how it
Yeah.
goes. Yeah.
And before I get to the wrap up questions, I just have two quick questions for you. One, because I feel like with any business, like it could be a boutique or starting a magazine, it takes time to actually make a profit. How long would you say it took you before you were able to be like, yes, I can pay myself a decent check every month?
Well, many, many years. So the magazine started in 2009, and I had like for a while there I still did graphic design and I had the shop so there was lots of things supporting everything at the same time. But in 2010 I had my son Finley, and that's when I realized, okay, now I've got this other little human and I really, really have to make sure that this business is viable. And so I
Mm.
started paying myself a salary. But there was a number of tough years. In 2014, I had to do a reboot working with me at that time, and it just wasn't working for various reasons, and I wasn't able to support their salaries and mine and pay the print bill, so I had to do a hard reboot and let people go and then start over on my own. But the magazine continued, like it never missed an issue, and I took Marie Forleo's B School and
Oh,
learned a
yeah.
lot about how to market and run a business, because I had no training. Like as a graphic designer in art college, we didn't have any sort of business training. So I learned a lot from that and restarted. And from then on, I can say that my magazine has been profitable. But it took a number of years kind of floundering around before I got to that position. But yeah, so B School was really good.
That's good to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And I'll definitely put a link in the show notes. And then I
Mm-hmm.
was just going to ask you, what would you attribute to you being able to do this? Because magazines is a tough business. I've seen various magazines come and go through the years that brought tears to my eyes because I really love
Mm-hmm.
them. And you've been able to survive and make it. Especially remember, I feel like back in the day, people are like, paper is dead. No one's gonna buy hard copy books anymore. No one's gonna buy magazines anymore. And it was like,
Mm-hmm.
really? But really? And so even going through that era, I forgot what year that was. I feel like there was a certain year where I feel like that's all I heard. It's like, no one's gonna
Mm-hmm.
buy books. No one's gonna buy this. How did you make it through it all?
Well, I heard that too, and I think I heard that when I was like launching my own magazine, it was sort of out of the death of other people's magazines that I decided to do my own, because like Martha Stewart had Blueprint magazine, and there
Oh,
was
yeah.
one called Domino magazine in its very first iteration, which was the iteration that I loved. They bit the dust for a while, and there were other magazines that were all folding, and they were all like, I couldn't understand how could something so beautiful from Martha Stewart not work out. And it has to do with advertising and ways that the magazines were being supported that were outside of who were reading it, basically.
Mm.
So Uppercase has never been relying on ads, and it's now there's no ads at all in the magazine. It's entirely
Yeah, I was like, I've
supported
never
by
seen it. Yeah, okay.
subscribers. Yeah. So I would say that's like the main reason why it's still going, because I'm creating the
Ah.
content for the people who are reading it, and I don't have to waste my time or be diverted by pleasing an advertiser, right? I'm creating content
Mm-hmm.
for people who are going to pay for it, and I'm very, as a one, be very responsive to people. They can send me suggestions and or email me, say, hey, I want to be in a magazine. And I'll say, great, what do you do? Right? Like I can be responsive in a very personal way. And I think that's been the secret to the success and the longevity, is because I'm not trying to be like a mainstream magazine at all. I'm just doing my own independent way.
I love it. I think that is really key for people to hear because you're right. Like when the market failed and everything went to puts in 2008,
Mm-hmm.
nobody was putting ad dollars into anything anymore, right? So a lot of businesses, including startups, folded that year. But you're right. If you're really just depending on people who just love what you're putting out, it changes things a little bit. And I think what's great too is it goes back to your community and you have like all these amazing artists in your magazine, and what are they going to do when they are featured in your magazine? They're going to share that they were featured, and then people are going to be like, ooh, what is this? Ooh, let me buy this magazine my friend is in. Ooh, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that also kind of I assume like helps out a
Yeah.
little bit too. Yeah, it was funny because I was just even reading this, your latest episode, and as I was going through it, I was like looking at people's Instagrams and going to their Instagram, right? So it's like this
Mm-hmm.
whole community and everybody is supporting each other. It seems like it also has contributed to your success. Hmm.
Yes. Yeah, that's very observant, and yeah, that's true, because it's how it works, right? And but it's very natural, and as you can see from the magazine, like everyone who's in there is very talented, and it's always high quality. So I'm just very grateful to have such talented readers spread the
Yeah.
word.
And then, do you have any advice for someone who's like, oh my God, I love what Janine has done. Her magazine is beautiful. I want to do something like that too for whatever topic. What would
Hmm.
you tell them?
Kind of a canned response when people email me this, like, I want to start a magazine. But the first thing is like, great, and yes, go for it. But you have to be tolerant of risk, right? Because it's a risky thing. So you have
Mm.
to figure out your financial aspects before you start anything, just to make sure that you can put it out there without risking personally. Like, I don't want people to start something that they can't support. You have to be tolerant about high tolerance, really, and then also to be willing to work really hard. Like, those are the two things. You have to just work really hard to, if it's your dream to make it happen, then you can make it happen, but you're just going to have to work really hard at it.
Mm. You heard it,
Mm-hmm.
people. Heard it here
Yeah.
first. So, a few wrap up questions. How do you stay organized? Of course, we talked about a few of the tools that you use, but are there any other tools that you use either on the computer or on your phone in order to stay organized?
Well, Notion has been the number one thing lately because you can also have that on your phone. Although I do tend to just take screenshots of stuff and email it to myself. Because, like you, I'm like inbox zero, right? So if it goes
Yeah.
into my inbox, I will take care of it. I'll put it like where it needs to go so that if it goes into Notion for future content ideas or whatever. That's the main thing. And I always keep a physical notebook with me for just jotting stuff down. And that's it. Like, I've been working at home for these past many months, and there's not a lot of stuff I need to physically organize, because it's created fairly digitally. I've got piles of books everywhere. But um, yeah, so I'm just keep myself organized in a digital realm and keep my head straight, like, to make sure that I'm not too overwhelmed so that I can still curate content and not feel overwhelmed. Like, that's sort of the challenge, I think, is to make sure that I'm able to keep my head clear so that I can stay organized in all aspects of my life.
Yeah, and for you iPhone junkies out there with the new iOS 14, there you could set certain things to the back tap function. So when I tap the back of my phone 3 times, it takes a screenshot for me, which
Oh,
I
okay.
love. Yes. It's so good because I'm like you. Like when I see something, it could be on Instagram, it could be wherever, and I'm like, I want to remember this. I just double tap on my phone and then it goes into like my little screenshot folder. And then I have like this whole process. It's a problem. And then, do you have a hobby?
Hmm. I tend to, I don't know, I kind of ruin my hobbies in a way because they become part of my work life. I like to sew, and so sewing is my main hobby. I love to sew by hand, but I also sew by machine. So I've created some fabric, actually, that part of each issue of the magazine, there's a different pattern that I designed for the spine and masthead based on the themes. And so a lot of
Mm.
those have been made into fabric by Wyndham Fabrics out of New Jersey. So I have my
Mm.
own line of fabric. So that involves sewing things and making stuff to kind of help advertise the fabric line and stuff. So I've started to try quilting. I can't call myself a quilter yet because I'm still learning, but I definitely like doing patchwork and hand sewing, and also do a bit of crochet. So I like doing things with my
Oh.
hand to keep me, those are my hobbies. Yeah.
No, I love it. And I love that because we've talked about the magazine, but you have like, a little diversity in the income coming in because you have the fabric line. And then I just assumed that you didn't have the store anymore. Is that correct? Or do you still have the store that you once had?
No, I closed that a long time ago.
Okay,
So yeah,
okay.
yeah, no, after my son was born, that was the end of retail. We can't do
Okay.
everything. And the place where I had my shop was that the Art Central thing wasn't, they sold the building and it was demolished for a high rise.
Oh,
So
dang.
no, I haven't done retail in a long time. But the online shop where people can buy my magazines and books, that continues. But yeah, no retail for me.
Well, please tell people where they can find you. They're going to make you 61,000 subscribers.
Well, you can find me at uppercasemagazine.com. That's the website. And then on Instagram, uppercase mag.
Perfect.
And that's me.
Thank you, Janine. Appreciate you coming onto the podcast.
My pleasure.
Well, my friends, this is the end. Really good episode, right? Oh my goodness, so many takeaways. Bottom line, I want you guys to take away that number one, success just doesn't come overnight. You have to put in the hard work. Also, I want you to take away, use your community, right? She got those first, what was it, 500 or so subscribers just by tapping into the people that she knows. I think sometimes, hey, I even get like this too. We don't want to bother the people we know. We don't want to ask for anything, ask for people to buy stuff for us. But if we can't talk to even the people in our circle, how are we going to get perfect strangers to buy our stuff? And then the last thing is, I like how she kind of walks us through her creative process because you need a process. I have a process for my podcast, and anytime I'm creating products and collecting ideas, I also have a process so I can easily access my information if it's who I want to have on next season, all the way to what YouTube videos I'm thinking about creating next and what I might need for them. Lots of good nuggets in here. Those are just a few that I wanted to pull out. If you need links to anything that she's blah, blah, anything that she's mentioned, sorry, I was looking at the links that I put in the show notes, and submittable was one of them. But anyway, you got to laugh at yourself, right? Okay, so if you go over to nachesnow.com/121, you will find all the links to all the things that she mentioned, from Mighty Networks to Submittable. I also included where you could submit to be in her magazine, where you could be part of that uppercase circle that's on the Mighty Networks, and then some of the other tools and courses that she mentioned. So head on over there, nachesnow.com/121. If you loved this episode, please share it. If you want to support the podcast, remember you can also go over to nachesnow.com and hit that shop button. And if you're looking to become more productive, you can find me on Skillshare. If you go to nachesnow.com/Skillshare, I have a course over there on productivity. And I was so excited that Janine mentioned that she took it, because literally, people, I had no idea that she actually took the course. So it's kind of funny. You put stuff out there and you never, ever, ever know who is actually using your stuff or taking your courses. So really flattered that she took the course, and that as a productivity junkie herself, the things that I mentioned in there resonate with her. So if you want to check it out, nachesnow.com/Skillshare. If you aren't already a Skillshare member, you will get 2 months free. If you are already on Skillshare, just search my name and the course will come right up. All right, folks, remember to rate me 5 stars if you love this. And I will be back next week. We're counting down, people, to the break. Anyway, have a beautiful, beautiful week. Take care.